Welcome to Talking WoW, the podcast where we talk about World of Warcraft, believe it or not. My name is Tom, and today I'm here with my co-host, Marty, as we take a closer look at why dungeon followers in World of Warcraft might be a good thing.
Hello, I am follower Marty.
So in 10.2.5, I think I got that right, Marty, didn't I?
You got that correct.
One of the new features that we will be getting is dungeon followers. So that means that you will be able to queue up for a normal Dragonflight dungeon currently with NPCs. Marty, what is your first reaction to this announcement?
I think my initial reaction, and I have done a 180 on this since then, but I think my initial reaction was like, do we need that in World of Warcraft? I mean, is that even something that is cool to have? I am not sure that I completely understand and feel like we need this. That was my initial reaction.
It's like, we don't need to sacrifice a raid tier for this. Is that what you were saying?
Probably. No, I don't think that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking, I'm not really sure that what is this? Why do we need it? Where, things like that. But the more I thought about it, I think, this is a great idea. I love the idea because I started thinking, are there someone else who does this? And as it turns out, there are a few other, without mentioning any specific names.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, go ahead. Do it. Please, just get it out the way. Get it out the way because you're going to be sitting on it all episode.
But you could totally go and do a normal dungeon in Star Wars: The Open Republic with NPCs, and you can, there's a lot of story quests that takes you through, dungeons or instances or whatever you want to call it. And World of Warcraft has the exact same thing. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this is actually a great idea because even I, who have no problem jumping into a group, sometimes have like days where I'm like, you know what, today I just want to chill. I just want to have something on the second monitor that I'm, watching. I don't want to, have to pay attention to other people. Sometimes I do have those days. So I did a 180 and I was like, this is a great idea. And I'm actually looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I think like that initial reaction as well. And actually my initial reaction for it being implemented in World of Warcraft, a lot different from when I first heard of this feature. Like you say, it was in Star Wars: The Old Republic. I believe it was also something introduced in the trust system in Final Fantasy XIV around Shadowbringers. So again, it was allowing people to go into dungeons without needing to queue up. And how it works in World of Warcraft, very similar. If you were just joining a normal dungeon anyway, you go into the interface and you select that, and hey, you get an instant queue because you're not actually waiting for other players. And I think, rolling that back, initially when I heard about this in other MMOs, I was like, is that a good thing? Because, it's an MMO, right? It's an MMORPG where you're supposed to be playing with other people. You're supposed to be connecting with other people. And suddenly, if you're able to do this group content just with NPCs, then suddenly it's going to take away from those connections that you could make with people. But then I stopped, Marty, and I thought about it for a little moment. And let's face it, if you join a normal dungeon these days, it kind of already feels like you're doing it with a bunch of bots, doesn't it?
I mean, it is quite rare that you... it's not unheard of. It does still happen, but it is quite rare that you actually have chatty people in those groups. It's usually someone who just wants to get through this kind of content quite quickly. And also, one thing that I also remembered was there was at a point where some quests, I believe it was doing Legion, some quests took you into dungeons, but not only that, they took you into mythic dungeons. And I know that there was a lot of people back then that was like, sure, mythic M0 is probably, not super difficult to get through if you know what you're doing, but still there's a lot of people like, how am I ever going to, check out this story content? Because I don't do this. This is way above what I feel comfortable with doing. And I bet that there is, the exact same people for all difficulties that don't want that social pressure of not necessarily knowing the dungeon the first time they run it. So everybody wins in this way because they can't go in, see the dungeon, and be like, oh, okay, and now I actually have an idea. Next step is then potentially to run it with real people.
Yeah, and I think it's worth stating again that this will just be for normal dungeons. And I've already seen the fear, I suppose, of people saying, oh, they're going to do this for heroic and mythic, and then we're just not going to need other players anymore. I'm pretty sure they're not going to be doing this for their flagship 5-man content of Mythic Plus. I don't ever see a timeline where we are running Mythic Plus with a bunch of NPCs. But hey, maybe, if the sub numbers get that low, maybe we have to. But I think initially the thought is there, like you say, Marty, you've got this quest lines that sometimes lead you to dungeons. And even myself, I find that when you get to that dungeon quest, you get a bit of a disconnect, because usually you're like, oh, but I'm in the flow of questing or doing my own thing. If I have to queue for a dungeon here, I could be lucky and I'm queuing for 5 minutes. I could be unlucky and I'm queuing for half an hour. And again, it depends what role you're fulfilling as well. If you're fulfilling DPS, for example, you're going to be waiting a little longer, and maybe you just say, well, you know what? I don't have time for that, or I don't want to be taken out of the flow of what I'm doing. And I actually think with follower dungeons now, it's such a great tool. And I've been playing this on the test realm as well, just to back that up. But imagine just getting to that point in your questing where you reach the dungeon and you're like, okay, I'm going to go in with a group of NPCs and we're going to see this part of the story as well. I don't have to wait. I don't have to find other people to do it. And like you say, people do have that pressure, don't they, of even on normal, of just having to group with other people. At least bots can't talk back as far as I'm aware.
I mean, they probably could, but then they're programmed to do so. So then that's a different problem. Maybe we can talk about that when and if that.
they're going to take over, Marty. The AI is going to overthrow all of us, and it's just going to be a bunch of NPCs doing dungeons together and playing the game. We're going to be replaced. No, we're not. No, we're not. But actually, just on that point, like I say, I have been venturing into the test realm to try this out. And something really, really cool about this, lots of cool things actually, but I jumped into the Algafar Academy dungeon, and something I did not know about this dungeon, and thanks to the NPCs that I was with in my group, there's these dragons in the starting area that you speak with, and they can give you a buff. And I didn't know about these dragons at all. I was never told about this. Obviously, when I've done this with other people didn't tell me this either. And yeah, you go into the dungeon, the NPC's like, yeah, speak with one of these dragons, they'll give you a buff. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, you're actually using this to explain how the dungeon works. So it's almost like a tutorial. Like, you're going to go into this normal, you're not going to die. Like, you are not going to die. You're not going to fail this. But it gives you a chance to go through, be told how certain things work. There was other points where there's like a, you have to hit that wind and like jump to another platform. The NPCs are explaining like, yeah, just run into that wind and it will take you over here. So it's actually really, really cool just for someone that's maybe new to a dungeon, new to an expansion, heck, new to World of Warcraft, Marty. There are apparently new people joining this game even at this stage. And I just was like, this is good. Like, this is great. You get to see how the bosses work. You get to see like if there's any little intricacies within the dungeon, and you just get that enlightenment of actually just how these basic things work, which normally, I don't know about you, Marty, if you're doing a dungeon like you say, people just want to get through it, don't they? They just want to get it done.
I think it's definitely something that, some of that information probably don't exist in normal and heroic for those reasons that you just queue up and do them and get out of there again, because those dragons is something I totally knew about, but obviously not when I stepped into the dungeon the first time. I was told by, the people that I play with, because we do mythic and Mythic Plus dungeon. So they obviously said, hey, remember to grab that buff because, everything helps when you're doing it on that level. But that being said, I think, as you're saying, it's like it's a great way to make that sort of tutorial to, how do some of these things in the dungeon work. An example is Neltharius. When you go into that dungeon for a long, long time, because I played the full season of this for a long, long time, you just ran it normally. You didn't do anything particular with the packs or anything, but it actually turns out that ever since day number 1 in those dungeons, there is, there's a hidden ability in the dungeon where you can grab a pack of mobs to certain points in the dungeon, and there's some chains that you can use to do insane amount of damage. In my experience, not too many people knew that in the first half of the season. It wasn't until the last half of that season that people figured out that you can do this. It's something you could add to things like that, to a normal run like that, but you don't have to, because I think it's also fun that there is that. It's one of those things we always, are talking about, that discovery. Oh, we figured this out. It's halfway through the season, and we finally figured out, a little bit of a hack to the dungeon, something you could do different, things like that. So I think it's a balance. I think Blizzard still needs to think about, what is like the minimum amount of information that we want to give people to move through this dungeon, and also leave something out for discovery.
Yeah, true. I mean, if you're running with randoms, it's very unlikely that you may be informed of, for example, that mechanic. So if you were to run it with your NPC followers the first time you go in there and they point it out, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I think that's good. Like teach us little things there that we can potentially use. Again, probably not everyone is going to use this feature. I feel like I will, because I really like dungeons, and something I do find, Marty, and I don't know if you find it as well, but usually the first time you go to a dungeon, you just don't get time to appreciate it. And I think something we talked about when we were talking about Aberrus, actually, just to segue on that, is after Aberrus was completed, you got to go back there and do some quests, and for me it was like, oh, I actually get to take in this environment. And I think that's really important, because you've got these, artists and developers making these dungeons, and they're great. Like, they add so much to the game, and they're a big part of what World of Warcraft is. And if you're running it on, for example, with randoms, or you just never get round to doing it on normal or heroic, and the first time you see it's in mythic, you don't have time to stand around and admire it, do you? You don't have time to just be like, oh, what a beautiful, beautiful dungeon this is.
Yeah, it's one of those things. One of the things that I always miss out on is when there is NPCs talking in the dungeon. I mean, not voice lines in your ears, but the text you need to read, if there's speech bubbles, stuff like that. I don't see that, because I'm so focused on other things when I'm running through with people, because, the tank is running, he's already pulling the next pack, I'm the healer, I need to keep everyone up. I'm very, very focused on that, on those things. So it's definitely something where I can see myself doing that, just to get that story feel for it. And also, as you already mentioned, when you're in that, what I normally do when I level and you get to that dungeon quest is that I save them for later, because I need to do group content, and I'm in a different flow right now. I'm doing quests. I want to focus on that. I want to get to max level, and then I'll do the dungeon quest later. I'll save them for later. And I could totally see myself change. If I can just run in with NPCs in the moment right now while I'm in this flow, I could totally see myself do that.
Yeah, it's something I've noticed specifically with Shadowlands, which I'm going through since I didn't do it when it was current, and Dragonflight obviously, is they've done really well with taking the quest lines and then dropping you at it the front of a dungeon and being like, this little side story continues here. And it was a bit different, back in Classic, or, those days where dungeons were just dungeons, and sometimes they were just there for being there, and there was a story there, but it didn't really feel like it fitted as well as it does now. So I think this comes at a really good time, I think, with regards to the game, and they're going to start with Dragonflight. Whether or not this becomes a feature for every dungeon, in the past? That's a question mark. I think probably they will implement something like that, but maybe not with the amount of detail that they are perhaps putting into new dungeons with explanations on things. We've seen Final Fantasy, they started off with their current expansion at the time, Shadowbringers, I think it was, and they've slowly but surely rolled that out to every single dungeon now in the game so that you can do this with NPCs. And like you say, it's not a new thing. It's not an uncommon thing. We've seen it in other MMOs as well. And you might be wondering, Marty, when you're in this dungeon and perhaps you're not the tank, maybe you're the healer, you're probably the healer. And you're like, well, how does it work? How does it work, right? I get in there, what happens?
Wait, Tom, let me ask you this. How does it work?
There we go. I'm glad you asked. Because there's like a little toggle ability where you can basically say, I'm in charge, I'm going to take us the route which way we're going. And if you pull something, the NPC tank will go in there and start pulling aggro of everything. You know, you can be a really naughty DPS and just pull stuff, but the tank will take it off you. And guess what? The tank doesn't even shout at you. It's great. And that's what can happen. Or you can toggle that ability and suddenly the tank will take charge and they'll say, okay, champion, I'll lead the way. And you follow this NPC tank and they're going around. They're not pulling everything. Like, they're making smart decisions. And I'm really impressed with how the AI is working, because I just imagine it would be like, oh, it's going to pull everything. Like, it sees something, it's just going to pull it and kill it because, you know, it's probably got limitations. But no, in the dungeons that I did, it didn't always pull everything. I guess it's on some sort of, you know, rail where it's given an optimal route and it's not pulling everything. So I thought that was pretty cool that there's a way to toggle between that. And you'll usually find, Marty as well, don't worry, if you're getting thirsty or hungry in there, that it seems like they do always have a mage in the group that drops a table at the start for you to get your food as well. So just really nice touches. And you see the NPCs, you know, bit of flavor text when you get in there. And I don't know, I think this is going to be a big hit. Do you think so?
I mean, it definitely has the potential. I think so, because I remember one of the things when I played, sorry to mention it twice, Star Wars: The Old Republic. I think, though, if I remember correctly, those ones over there are not on rails. I think you are the one who's leading the charge, but they will jump in and tank stuff and taunt stuff and things like that. But one of the fun things was always for me to, you know, see how much I could solo that way with the NPCs, and it definitely has the potential to it. I can definitely see something that could be fun. The only thing is, you know, it's only normal in this case, I think. So, you know, I don't think it's too, probably not too difficult. But still, I think that there's definitely some fun gameplay that could be had in that. And I'm actually looking forward to checking it out myself a little bit more, because just haven't had time in the recent few weeks.
The WoW thing as well, like, we're not talking about a feature here that's coming in with an expansion or even a major patch. This is coming in a minor patch, which to me, I'm just like, this feels like a big thing. Like, this feels like they could have announced it at BlizzCon and said it was coming with, you know, the latest expansion or something like that. It feels like it's a hefty feature, and I don't know, it makes me excited when, you know, they drop things like this. And what else are they sitting on, Marty? What else are they cooking there over in Blizzard HQ? Because this just feels like a great feature to the game.
It almost feels like they are renovating World of Warcraft. They're taking some of those foundations and breaking them down and are building new systems, new things, you know, improving on some of all the base mechanics and of the game. And just look at, you know, how they're tackling reputations going forward, the warband stuff. So yeah, it feels like they're modernizing World of Warcraft once and for all, a big overhaul, and I'm here for it. I'm all here for it.
But what about you, dear listener? Are you here for it? Are you excited for follower dungeons? Or do you say, down with the AI, I'd rather have real flesh and blood with me when I'm doing my instances? You can let us know at the places that you do that. I have been Tom, that has been Marty, and we have been talking WoW.
Thanks for tuning in, champion! Did you enjoy this episode of Talking WoW? If so, why not drop a review on your podcast catcher of choice, or leave us a comment? You can find Talking WoW on Twitter or YouTube over at Talking WoW. Hope to see you again soon!